Hey guys, it's Scott Mullins again with Rock for Him. It's time for our podcast again, and it's episode 33 this time. And joining me tonight, I've got my co-host Jeremy Brown. Jeremy, how you doing, buddy?
Good. How are you,
And
Scott?
also with us, oh, I'm sorry about that. Also with us, our special guest tonight. Been so excited for this podcast. It's Sam Day. He's got solo project and he's also with the band The Reclaimers. Sam, how you doing?
I'm good, guys. Just chilling out on this Tuesday night. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. And am I correct in saying Sam or do you go by Samuel?
You can call me Sam. That's totally fine. Officially, if people want to find the music, it is under Samuel Day, but you can call me Sam. It's all good.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure we got that straight. So maybe to kick us off, maybe tell us a little bit about your solo career. Maybe, I don't know if you want to share anything on the Reclaimers or not. Maybe introduce the band or let us know what's going on with that.
Absolutely. So, as you said, I have two different projects that I'm involved with. Samuel Day is my solo project, but I do have a live band that plays with me. Those guys are Michael Cerrone on the guitar, Brad Tillery on the bass, and Jerry Buell on the drums. We just got fresh off of playing Sunfest a little over a week ago in Mount Vernon, Ohio, which was a great time. And that project focuses more on poppy sounds overall and kind of a wide spectrum of what would be considered pop, but definitely in that area. And then Reclaimers is basically the same people. At least it's myself, Michael, and Brad. And it's our rock-focused project. We all come from kind of a rock-focused background. Not the primary focus of what I'm doing right now, but it's something that we have a lot of fun with. And again, all sharing that background, it's nice to be able to have a foot in both ponds.
Nice, nice. So I just wanted to bring that up because we do play both solo and band on our station. So I wanted to make sure we cross both those bridges with you. So
Cool, thank you.
Jeremy, what do you got?
Well, so where are you guys located at?
So I always tell folks I'm in the Cincinnati area. I actually live in a small town north of Cincinnati, but for all press release purposes, basically Cincinnati.
Okay.
Okay.
That's cool. One of the things we like to do first on our podcast is demonstrate to our listeners that we're into this more than just for the music. We are more about the word and the aspect of God or Christ in our mission. So if you wouldn't mind, can you please share? Oops, sorry about that. If you have a second, maybe you could share your testimony with us, how you became a Christian.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was raised in a pastor's home. My grandmother was my pastor for most of my life until a few years ago when she passed and went home to be with Jesus. And I know that when a lot of people hear that you're raised in a atmosphere, there's a little bit of cynicism and a little bit of skepticism that comes with that, right? Because it's like, well, you believe because your parents believe, you believe because your grandma told you to. And I can really and truly say that is not the case. I was never manipulated. I was taught by my family, but never manipulated by them. It was always my choice, what I was going to do. Of course, they encouraged me to go in the right direction, but there came a certain point and a certain age at which I really clearly had a choice of what I was going to do with what I chose to believe and who I wanted to follow. And what I mean by that is, there were times where I saw a lot of, let me just say, I guess, people in my cohort, whether they were music peers or whether they were people that I had known personally growing up, kind of go their separate ways. And there was a lot of pressure involved in that without going into too much detail, where it was like, all right, am I going to stand on what I have seen in the Word of God for myself, not just what my parents have told me? Am I going to stand on that? Am I going to recall to myself the testimonies that I have seen and heard? Or am I going to let pressure get to me and go in the opposite direction and freak out in the midst of a intense situation? And so I think everybody really comes to that point. there, you know, again, there are so many times when people look at you and say, well, you were raised in a church setting. But after you've lived long enough and you've been around the block a few times, you aren't the sheltered church kid people assume that you are. And I guess I'll leave it at that. But I would just encourage anybody who finds themselves in that situation to find testimonies. That's something I've been telling our church about a lot lately. I love going and finding either stories of people that I know personally, or even people that I don't, but who are still alive today. If I can find their stories online or on a program, or a ministry shares them or whatever, I keep and I store those things so I can go back to them and say, Lord, this is what you do in people's lives. This reminds me of who you are, regardless of if my feelings line up with that today or not.
Nice. So, who are your influences both musically and lyrically?
Yeah, so I have always been, and you probably hear this from musicians all the time. It's a very cliche thing to say, but it's very true for a lot of us, is I have a very wide taste. Obviously, being a pop artist, that's also part of a hard rock band. That sort of, I guess, goes without saying. But one of my earliest lyrical influences was Peter Furler from the Newsboys. And the reason that I bring him up is because read like middle era Newsboys lyrics, read them without it, separate it from the music. There's some really genius stuff in there. There's some really clever wordplay and referential, kind of tongue-in-cheek humor embedded in those lyrics that you almost miss if all you're paying attention to is the chorus of Breakfast or whatever. So when I started really paying attention to the way Peter writes, I mean, he's still writing, he's just not with the Newsboys anymore. It was so multi-dimensional, and I think that had a big influence on me. One of my other biggest early influences, honestly, my mom was a huge fan when I was growing up. And what I have always loved about what he did was he did everything big. He did it with excellence. I mean, he had a music video for every song that he made. I went to one of his, when he was doing stadium shows in the round in the 90s, I went to one of his concerts. I must have been like 7 years old or something. But man, they had dancers and set changes, and it was this whole production. And the man led all kinds of people to Jesus, but he did so on such a wide scale. And if I can use this word, he did it in such a competitive way. And I don't mean that he competed with other artists. I mean that like his production was on par with anything you saw going on in, if quote unquote, the secular world. And I've always admired that about what he managed to do during his life.
That's very cool. That's very cool. I never did have a chance to see him, and but I've heard a lot of people were influenced and loved his shows, and so thanks for sharing that. So how long have you been solo artist? How long have you been in a band? I mean, what about since your music career start?
I don't remember a time when I didn't want to do music. It's kind of been a lifelong thing. Officially, on paper, my first EP came out in 2012. So I guess I tell people about 10 years at this point.
Okay.
And it's really interesting because at that time I didn't have as defined an idea of how to handle the wide amount of music I enjoy making. So I just kind of did it all under one thing. So that first EP will probably be disappearing from the internet here sometime soon because it's kind of a rock EP with some pop songs in there.
Okay.
And it's just everything is happening all at once. They're great songs, but one of the things that the team and I have talked about is taking those hard rock songs and putting them, re-recording them, and possibly putting them in the Reclaimers catalog, and keeping the pop tunes like The Screen or some of the stuff off the remix album and leaving that in the SD camp so that we can penetrate both of those audiences more effectively. But at the time, I have to admit, I really love mixed genre music. I love when I hear a heavy hard rock band writing with poppy melodies or vice versa. I think that's just the most intriguing thing in the world. But what I had to learn over time was that most listeners aren't like me. Like most listeners like their pop music or their country music or their worship music. Not to say that they're not open to new things, they don't ever want to be challenged, but a musician listens to music differently than a normal everyday person. And that's something that over the years I had to understand in order to reach my audiences better.
I got you. That's cool. I'm kind of like you. I would like a little mix because that way, unfortunately, and this is personal. Sometimes it seems like down the road, the same EP that you heard on the fifth EP is the same, very similar to the first EP. So I think it would be interesting. And if you're watching this podcast and if it's still out there, go grab that first EP, because if it's disappearing, you're going to have a collector's item there. So go get that right now.
True.
But anyway, so you got to do what you got to do, I guess, right? But
well, and I don't mean to, and you bring up a good point, right?
Yeah.
You still want to develop over time as an
Right.
artist. You still want to mature. But what it's challenged me to do is to learn each style of music as if it's its own specific trade.
Yeah.
So really be serious about like pop/worship music, and then really be serious about hard rock music. Learn those things individually such that as I grow in both of those areas, those things can still change and develop over time. Because, I'm like you, I don't want to hear an artist do the same thing forever.
right.
And I think that as much as I have a background in the hard rock world, I think that's something that they could potentially learn. And I want to say this with really carefully, because this is not a criticism toward anybody, and it's not to say that nobody is doing what I'm saying either. But I think that there are times that both of those worlds can learn from each other. And I'll you know what, I'll leave it at that. But there are so many times that I'm at a rock show and I'm thinking, man, if they would do this and this and this that the pop industry does, they could reach their audience even better, or vice versa. You're at a pop show and you're like, man, I bet more musicians would be into this if XYZ. And so again, it's a very interesting perspective to be fully involved in both of those worlds and to see the strengths and weaknesses that both of them experience over time.
Good points. Good
Yeah,
points.
good points.
We've recently, there's a few artists out there trying to take heavier rock to worship. So there's kind of a new genre forming. We've had a couple of artists on that are doing that. So that's kind of interesting too. But Jeremy, what else you got?
So one of the questions we like to ask is when you're on tour, how do you stay grounded in your faith?
Well, I'll be the first to admit that I haven't gone on any real extended tours. Most of what I've performed at has been pretty focused events throughout the year. But this is a conversation that I've had with my team because I'm very involved with my home church. And I think every one of us, if we're speaking candidly, have seen some story over the course of our lives of a musician who started traveling more, started experiencing more success, and, drifted away from the Lord. I don't want that to be me. I don't want that to be people on my team. And so I think it's knowing before you find, if you can at all help it, knowing before you find yourself in that situation, that you need to continue to make time for your relationship with God and to stay connected to your church. It's really interesting that you bring this up, because I was having this conversation with somebody over Instagram just the other day, about the importance of church. And, the church isn't a place, it is a group of people.
Right.
But, I really believe that there's a group of people that we're still supposed to be connected to. And usually that's geographically, right? Because we do life together. It's one thing to say, oh, well, I have my own relationship with God. I read my Bible, that's cool, but I'm not really into that church thing because I've heard too many stories about scandals, or I had a bad experience, and all those things have happened. The church is made up of people, and people do not do everything perfectly. I get that. If you've been in church more than 5 years, you've had something happen in a church setting that made you at the very least uncomfortable. But that's because there's people involved. That's no different than going into the entertainment. The thing is, people will use that standard when it comes to church, but it's true at your job. It's true in your family. It's true in the entertainment industry. There's no situation you go into that people are involved in where you won't every once in a while rub shoulders the wrong way to varying degrees. And so, I've had this conversation with my team. I'm like, look, when we find ourselves traveling more or farther, I want to make sure that we're still making time for our relationship with the Lord, because if we're just trying to pull out of nothing and then go perform for other people, even if you're not thinking about it in a ministry context, even if you're just thinking about it in terms of being away from home, like, you still need something to sustain you. So I think if at all possible, you've got to have that mindset beforehand so that you're ready to set that time aside when the success and when that movement is happening.
Very well said. I like that. I like that. So we talked a little bit about your influences, Peter Furler and Carmen. If there was one artist you wanted to see or you want to see, who would that artist be? There's somebody, even it could either somebody who's not around or somebody who's still around.
Yeah. I forgot to mention, there's a lot more influences than even the two that I mentioned. Right now, I've been really into a European producer by the moniker of the Fat Rat. Really enjoy his productions. Great electronic producer who works with some really talented vocalists. So I'm into stuff all the way across the board. Also very into, or not very into, but quite enjoy a good handful of film scores. I enjoy like Hans Zimmer or Ramin Djawadi, some of those people who are writing for bigger Hollywood films. In terms of an artist that I'd really like to see, the two best productions I've seen in person are that concert that I went to when I was a kid that I spoke about earlier. And I saw Toby Mac a few years ago, and I was really impressed with what he had going on. So honestly, I think I'd like to see some more mainline pop concerts. I almost don't even have a preference as to who. Maybe like a Justin Bieber or for King and Country, a faith-based artist. But anybody who's doing production at a high level. I went to a lot of rock concerts when I was younger. I've seen a lot of the bands that were big during the mid 2000s. We had a great venue just right near me where a lot of the major tours came through. So I saw, your Skillets and your Disciples and your Demon Hunters and Decipher Down back when Caleb was still singing. And, so I would just really like to see more mainline pop productions, because one thing I really enjoy about the pop world is the visual aspect of what they bring to a concert experience. So somebody like a For King and Country or a Bieber or somebody up that alley, I'd love to be at more shows like that taking notes.
Nice. So I know you've got a music video coming out soon. Do you want to kind of shed some light on that, or?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. So there's a brand new music video coming out for Rise. Rise is not a new song. It's been out for a couple of years now. I think 2019 is actually when it came out. And it did really well for me among pop listeners. It was kind of a pop and electronic listeners. It's a pretty aggressive pop song, if we're being honest, but it did really well among EDM listeners. And it was sort of a turning point for me, because all the way up until there, I hadn't really figured out electronic production to the level that I wanted to. I do a lot of my own production. My most recent song, Meant to Be, I co-produced with a young producer out of Nashville by the name of Jacob Stanifer, who did an awesome job. But it was the first time I really felt like it had clicked for me, and I was getting that style in a really successful, accessible way. So last year, believe it or not, nearly almost exactly a year ago, we shot this video. And I won't say too much about it because the video is not quite out yet, but I knew I wanted to involve really striking visuals and do something I had never done before. So I have 2 other music videos out that I'm very happy with for The Roses, which is one of the first ballads I ever put out. And then The Screen, which is more of an electronic pop tune, but it's piano driven. And then I've got a more modest performance video for a Christmas tune called Better Than Before. But it'd been a while since we did something that was higher production. And so I got a hold of some friends of mine. I had a really defined idea. And if you've seen my social media, you've already seen some of the costumes involved, the white hoodies with the full face LED masks. And I got a hold of some dancers because I was really inspired by some of the attitude and style I was seeing among things like K-pop music videos and things of that nature. And I was like, you know what? I really want to elevate the visuals to the next level. I've never done anything in that that involved choreography before. So got a hold of a couple of very talented dancers, Montana Bridgeford and Emma Zancan. Montana I had worked with in the past in a musical, in a theater setting a few years ago. I was a part of a original musical called The Christmas Journey that was written by a larger church here in the area that now goes by New Heights Church. And so got back in touch with her and they did their choreography and we shot something really interesting and really special. We had a lot of technical things to work our way through over the past year, but the final product was definitely worth the wait. So I'm excited for it to be coming out next Wednesday on October the 5th.
Nice.
Very cool. That sounds exciting and awesome at the same time.
Right.
But so we, I think one of the first ones you sent to us was Warrior Spirit. We have Rise too, but I want to say that came in after. So I'm not, you said I've been out a couple years, but Warrior Spirit was intriguing to me because you had taken something you enjoy. And I'm not sure what's going on with my video. I apologize, but another something you enjoy and you kind of took a turn and made it. I mean, it was very impressive when I first heard. I loved it, and our fans loved it too. Maybe you could share a little bit of how that one came around. I mean, I know a little of the background because you had sent some stuff with it, but for the listeners listening.
Absolutely. So I am what's called a first Q brown belt in Kenpo. Kenpo is like a form of karate, but we have a very mixed system that includes some Filipino weapons fighting, a little bit of Muay Thai influence, and some jiu-jitsu influence. I was really big into martial arts as a teenager, and I had gotten all the way up to brown belt, and because of some circumstances at the time, stopped at that point. And for 12 years after that, hadn't been back into that world. You know, I work out on my own, but hadn't been back there into a dojo in a formal setting. So about a year and a half ago, I was like, you know what? I'm done with college. I've got my, I can drive to our parent school is up in it's about 45 minutes from where I live. And I was like, I want to get back into this and I want to finish what I started because I had never made it all the way to black belt. I had gotten close, So I started back up again. And even though I had never stopped training and working out, those first few months of getting back into martial arts were really challenging because you can be in shape to do one thing, but not to do another. It's really interesting. Like if you were to ask, I don't know, a volleyball player to play football or something, you could just in shape is really relative to what you're doing. And after about 3 months of getting back into training and just feeling like I was not where I remember being, I finally had a moment of, in the middle of sweating through my gi and doing push-ups and stuff, going, yeah, bring me more. And that was the moment where I was like, this is an inspiring thing. This is an inspiring feeling. Right. And that got me thinking about, when you bring up something like martial arts and you're a Christian, some people have that question in your mind of, well, isn't that a violent thing? How do you reconcile that with the love of Jesus and with maturity? You're learning how to hurt people. And so I really started thinking about that. And that's what inspired this song. It is about the balance of maturity and power, right?
Right.
What we're taught in the Word of God is to be strong, but to also walk in love. And you can be as strong as you want to be, but if you don't know how to walk in love, you're not very useful, and you don't have self-control. And so what came about was this really cool driving pop anthem that I hope everybody is just blasting in their earbuds when they're in the gym. But I encourage you, if you haven't heard the song yet, go check out the lyric video. I went super old school kung fu movie with the aesthetic, and read the lyrics and think about the things that I just talked about. And I think you'll get something out of it.
That's
Absolutely.
great.
So, do you have anything else on the horizon, like any new music, or we talked about the videos and stuff.
The blanket answer is always yes to that. There's always something new kind of cooking. The music video for Rise is definitely the next big thing. Super excited that my new single Meant to Be it's been out for a few months now, but that's still relatively new. And that one's definitely for the more mainline pop listeners, kind of trying to dive more into that. Again, Jacob Stanifer did a great job helping me bring that to the next level. As far as new stuff, there's about 3 songs I've got on the burner right now. I started one actually just last week that I'm really excited about, but there's another that is a more worship-centered song that I wrote years ago, and we've actually performed live, I've never released a studio recording for, because I was trying to get a handle on really what the production for that should sound like. So I'm not sure what order those things are going to come out in yet, but definitely a lot being loaded into the cannons right now, coming to a radio station near you.
That's great. That's great. Hopefully one in Flint, Michigan, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I know you kind of said, and I loved your the definition about touring, how grounded you are and aware of how important it is to get all aspects before you just jump into that. Because I think a lot of times in the industry, you see so many people get pressured, and this is what you got to do next, and you got to be doing this and this and that. So that was very appreciate you sharing that. But I mean, down the road, do you see ahead, or is it always just going to be like a little? Is it something you want to? Will you get bigger or pursue that, or is it just something you enjoy, like as a hobby, and that's your ministry? And maybe share a little bit of future plans, maybe.
I want to do music on the highest levels.
Okay.
That definitely is true. But what that looks like in terms of life balance is different in my mind now than it used to be. I want to play the biggest venues in the world, and I want to fill them up. But does that mean I want to be on the road 10 months out of the year and not seeing my family?
Yeah.
Not necessarily. As I said, I'm very involved in my church. I'm interested in the areas of acting and filmmaking as well. The music videos that we've shot, we've done them in-house. I've done some acting projects on the side. And all of those are things that require time and attention. And, one day down the road, if I have kids or something, I want to be a good dad.
Right.
So do I want to be touring? Yes, I do. But I always want to keep those lessons in mind that I've learned during the time of just playing intermittent shows, of seeing the importance of keeping my life balanced. Because even during this time, a few months ago, I was telling people I'm accidentally pulling 14-hour days. And eventually that came to a place where it was like, dude, Sam, you need to, and I believe this is from the Lord, you need to simplify your life. And I've learned the value of that. So that's I really strive for excellence in every production, every mix, every video, because I do want to do this at the highest levels. But I do not want to become unhealthy or unbalanced, either in the pursuit of that or even when I've quote unquote arrived, whatever that looks like.
All right. That was a great answer to that question. Thank you for sharing. And I can tell just by your enthusiasm.
No, I think we lost them for a moment.
Right. So we got about 10 minutes left. One thing we like to do is pray. Is there anything we can pray for you guys for? Like you specifically, or the ministry, or, you know?
Sure. Yeah. When people ask this question, I often say, I always appreciate prayer for wisdom when it comes to music, or even some of the other things that I mentioned. There's a lot of decisions to be made in anybody's life, and so I always appreciate prayer for wisdom and clarity to know what to do with every opportunity, every project that might be coming up.
Okay, hold on. I got a message from Scott.
Hey, Jeremy, my computer died, so we're going to have to wrap up.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead and pray. I'll go ahead and pray then. Lord, we just thank you for the day. We thank you for this time with Sam. We thank you for his ministry, and for the ministry of Rock for Him that allows us to connect. God, we just ask that you continue to bless Samuel and Reclaimers and everything that they've got going on, and the same with Rock for Him, Lord. And we just thank you for this time we've had together. Lord, may you be glorified, and we give you all the highest praise. We ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. So, where can people find your music? Are you Spotify, all the pertinent stuff, or?
Yeah, all of the above. Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you name it, I've probably got it. The easiest way to find it is to just Google Samuel Day or head to samueldayofficial.com. Awesome.
All right. Is there anything else you want our listeners to know before we go?
Sometimes people, they often ask me sort of what the mission statement is. And something that I've been telling folks a lot recently is to give a voice to victory. There's a lot of things coming at us all the time. There's a lot of feelings that we deal with, and those things are valid, but they can't be the final decision maker in our lives. And so I would just encourage folks, stay close to Jesus, and hopefully I have encouraged folks through the music that I've made or the other things that I've put out to do so.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's going to do it for our podcast. I just want to say thank you again for joining us, Sam. And I'm Jeremy, and Scott was here, and we will see you guys next time. Remember, if you're going to rock for him. All right, have a good
If you like what you saw today, hit the subscribe and like button down below, and don't forget to share it to all your friends. Also, leave us a comment down below. If you're gonna rock for him.